Right, good morning everybody. Thank you very much for coming this morning, and a big thank you as well to those people who are returning, because you've heard this before, but you're coming for a refresher, which is really great to see. This is very odd for me as well, because I'm being filmed here so that it can go on the website for those people who haven't been able to make it today. So, I've got a very glamorous assistant here, because I'm a little quickly sticking this work here.
His remote controls are
so when I do this,
it's a very important job of pressing the slides.
Right, okay. Okay, so a little explanation of the aims of this session, really. So, we're going to explain how children are assessed at the end of Key Stage 1, how this information is used. You'll have a chance to look at the tests. So behind me here, I've got examples of the different types of tests for you to have a look at. Please don't take them away with you, because we do use them in school to kind of practice with the children. And then, really importantly, things that you could do with your child to support at home as well. Okay. So I'm going to go right back in history now to those changes in 2015 to 16. So previously the children were awarded a level at the end of year 2, which is the end of Key Stage 1, and the expected standard being a level 2. Now you can see on there we've got level 2 is split into two parts, 2C, 2B, 2A. 2A being the higher part of the level 2, 2C being the lower part. But the children were expected to fall within a level 2. Those children that were exceeding that were given a level 3, that wasn't broken down, and those that were working towards that expected standard were a level 1. But then everything changed, and all those levels have disappeared, and it was replaced with some new tests. Now, it gets a bit weird here. These tests were replaced, and they generate, a standardised score. The tests are externally set and internally marked, so we have no idea what the tests are going to look like, but we mark them internally, which is a difference to what happens at the end of Key Stage 2 in Year 6. Teacher assessment, and I've underlined this and put it in bold. Teacher assessment, as always, is the main way we will assess your child. We use that to build up a picture of your child's learning. So as your child's class teacher, I and your other class teachers know exactly where your child is at. So the tests are just an extra thing that we have to do, statutory requirement. At the end, your child will receive an overall result, and this will say whether they have achieved the expected standard. So, loads of writing on that one. So, just a little explanation of how the tests work, really. So, their raw score, so that is the score that they get on the test, the actual number of marks. That is translated into a scaled score. And then the idea behind this is it just allows for differences between difficulty of tests. So, they set a scale score, so no matter how difficult the test is, there's going to be the same scaled score that the children have to achieve. You'll be told whether your child has reached the expected standard, or whether they're working towards it, or whether they've exceeded the expected standard. Children in other subjects as well, because I don't want you to just think it's just about the maths and the English. The children will also be matched against level descriptors in other areas as well. So we assess them in all the other subjects, art, DT, computing, music, against level descriptors to again gain an idea of whether they are at the expected standard, if they've met all those objectives. Your child teacher will mark the test paper, as I mentioned, and the results will be reported using what's known as the scale score. So I've explained that already, how that scale score works. If you want to ask me a bit more about that at the end, you can do. A score of 100 means the child is working at the standard expected of them. So for instance, the maths paper might be out of 35 marks, and if the child achieves 29, it might be converted into a scaled score of 100. So they're saying that to get the expected standard on that paper, you have to get 29 and 35. Whereas on the reading paper, it might be a case that out of the 35 questions, they have to get 20 to get a scaled score of 100. So the scaled score changes depending on the paper. A score of 100 or above suggests a child is working at or above the expectations at their age. And the maximum score possible is 115, and the minimum is 85. So, as I mentioned before, you will not be told the results of the test. And the reason for that is it's just a really small part of how we assess your child. I feel like I should have stood here, really. Really small part of how we assess your child. So what you will be told is whether your child is working at the expected standard, which is where we expect the children to be, whether they're working what's called at greater depth, so that means that they are working beyond the expected standard, and whether they're working towards the expected standard. So it's kind of broken down into three parts. If you imagine expected in the middle, greater depth up, working towards just below that.
Sorry, Steve. Do you mention later about how much more tricky they are?
The tests? No, I can do that. Yeah.
Just briefly mention, sorry,
yeah?
double out. One thing I think it's worth mentioning as well is the fact that since 2016, when these new tests were introduced, the expectation, because the new curriculum came at that point as well, around what children need to achieve to be at national standard is significantly higher than it used to be. And I mean significantly higher. If you talk about Key Stage 2, for example, when the tests came out in 2016, nationally, 53% of children achieved the national standard in reading, writing, maths combined. So over half the population in schools of year 6s did not achieve the expected standard. We achieved 80 odd, so we won't go there, but we did much better. But having said that, the expectation is significantly higher than it used to be. So it wasn't just about changing it from level 1, 2, 3, level 1, 2 and 3, it was actually about changing the expectation too. And that to a certain extent has been mapped across Key Stage 1 as well. So although we still perform well, nationally, you're only looking at kind of around the low 70% mark of achieved national standard nationally at Key Stage 1. So, whereas it used to be high 80s. Yeah. So it kind of gives you a benchmark of the fact the expectation is higher. Primarily because the expectation in the curriculum has grown over that same period of time. Sorry,
that's a really good point. And I've mentioned that to a lot of people who I speak to at parents' evening, how the expectation is just immense now. What's expected, particularly I would say of a year 2 child, what they've got to achieve by the end of Key Stage 1 is now immense. Absolutely right. So a little talk about how the actual tests work. So there's 2 English papers. English paper 1 is a combined reading and answer booklet. I've got examples up here for you to see a bit clearer. The idea being that there's a piece of text at the top, and then the children will answer questions related to that piece of text at the bottom. And then we've got reading paper 2. Now, the step up from reading paper 1 to reading paper 2 is quite large. And reading paper 2 is also far more, not only is it a more challenging text, but the children actually have it in a separate booklet as well. So they have the actual text that they're reading in one booklet, and then they have the questions in another booklet. So not only have you logistically now got to deal with both of these at the same time, you've also got a much higher level of reading that needs to go on in this paper as well. And then there's 2 maths papers. There's an arithmetic paper, which is exactly like it sounds, so that's looking at all those mental maths skills, times tables, addition, subtraction, multiplication, looking at how they might use particular methods to solve things. And then the second paper is a reasoning paper, so that's what we do loads and loads of at school, teaching the children how they will apply these things they know, these mathematical methods into everyday life. So there'll be questions in the paper such as, I have 4 boxes of shoes with 2 shoes in each box, how many shoes have I got all together? The papers gradually, and this is the same for all of them, the reading and the maths one, they gradually get more difficult as they go through the paper. The idea being that every single child can access some of those questions, but then as they go through the test, they gradually become more and more challenging. You might not know, but when the papers first came out, there was there was a grammar and punctuation, and there was a big hoo-ha because it was accidentally published online. This paper has now become optional. We as a school often do it because it's just another way of assessing the children. So the grammar and punctuation is looking again at those things like whether they understand where particular types of punctuation go in a sentence, if they understand types of words, word classes, adjectives, nouns, adverbs, those types of things. So actually they're really important things that the children need to know. And while we do assess them all the time of it through their writing, it's also quite good to see if they can apply it in the tests as well. They do, however, take a spelling paper, so that has stayed. So if they take a spelling paper, it only has 20 words on it, but they, again, very similar to these other tests, they gradually become more and more challenging, and they test them on all the different spelling patterns. So all the spellings that they currently bring home each week, it will test them on a range of those spelling patterns to see if they can apply those. This is just an example here of a question from the grammar one. So you can see it says, write the missing punctuation mark to complete the sentence below. So it's expecting them to recognise that that is a question and to put a question mark at the end of it. What type of word is underlined? So Poppy held the baby rabbit gently in her arms. They have to identify what type of word is underlined there. Your children will know this, so while I'm not saying that any of you are sitting down here thinking I couldn't answer that, because I'm sure you can, your child will know. Okay? And then just another one there. So the verbs in the boxes are in the present tense. Write these verbs in the past tense. So a really, really big thing of year 2 is that we start looking at the past tense and how words change when they're in the past tense. So that's a real big focus as well, and it comes in the test as well. English reading test, so really, really strong emphasis on comprehension. Again, at Parents' Evening, when anyone asks me how they can help the child at home, I always say, ask so many questions when they're reading. When they read a book to you, question them all the time. Ask them to locate information really quickly in the text. If you ask your child a question, I get them to prove it in the text, because these are all skills that they're going to need to be able to do. A, to be really accomplished readers, but also to be able to access a lot of the things in the test as well. Like I mentioned before, there's 2 reading papers. I just went over that again there. This is an example of the reading paper 1. So you can see we have some information at the top there, and then the children will answer a question at the bottom. The papers change. Some of them are tick boxes, some of them they have to draw arrows joining up particular words, some of them they actually have to write on. So throughout the year, in our guided reading sessions, and each week every year 2 class has a discrete reading session as well, we look at these skills, we look at how you can quickly locate information in a text. We give the children different varieties of questions to answer. So when it does come to May and the children do these, they don't think anything of it because they've spent all year looking at these types of questions, so it's not a big thing. And even though I keep referring to them as tests, the children know them as quizzes. They're just another quiz that we do in May. This is an example here of that reading paper 2. So, much larger piece of text, and then the children will have a separate answer booklet to answer the questions. It does help them a little bit because it does tell them which page they need to look at to find the answer to the question. So they don't have to read the entire piece of text and then start answering questions. It will tell them which page to look at. But the level of text that they're reading is much more advanced. And also reading paper 2, it really focuses on what we call inference and deduction. So the children are no longer just finding information in the text and literally copying that into their answer. They are now having to give their own opinions on things. Why do you think this happened? What do you think would happen if the ending was different to this story? Describe the character. So in the piece of text, it might not necessarily say, Mr Donnelly was a beautiful, handsome teacher, but it will give clues of it in the text. Paper 2, arithmetic and reasoning, again which I've mentioned, but just to kind of explain that a bit more. So arithmetic, it assesses the children's confidence and mathematical fluency with whole numbers, place value, counting. So really important things that children understand how numbers are made up. So if we had 134, knowing that that is 1 lot of 100, 3 lots of 10 make up that 30, and then you've got your 4 ones. So we do loads of work on breaking down those numbers into what's called their place value. And that's a really important skill for the tests. This is a little example here of what the arithmetic looks like. It's not very exciting, it's literally just a series of questions and they have to answer it. We really, really do encourage the children though to do little jottings, whatever they feel they need to do to answer the question. So another thing that's really key in our maths work in school is the children finding their own methods to answer things. So we will teach them a whole range of ways to do multiplication or division or addition or subtraction, and then the children simply choose the method that's right for them. I'm sure everyone here you've got ways that you add and subtract in your head, and so it's the same for children. We need to give them those skills, really. This is an example of the reasoning one, just like I mentioned before, actually. So, 2 shoes in each box, how many shoes are there all together? So they can draw them, they can count in 2s, whichever is right for them. And then do some comparison work there, using greater than and less than, and looking at the weights. So the tests will cover all the units of work throughout the year, so it's checking their understanding of all the things we've done. So why tests? Well, the main thing really is it's the statutory requirements that we have to do it. It does build up a picture of your child's learning and their achievements, so it just works alongside what we as the class teacher do. So while we're assessing your child all the time, it's just an extra form of assessment really, another way to build up a picture. It's really important for me to mention at this point though that, you know, children are children, they're human beings, so a child could come in May and perform really poorly on the test, and that might not be a fair reflection of them. They might be feeling run down, they might be tired, they might have had a sleepless night, who knows. So it's not, it truly isn't the be-all and end-all, because there are those anomalies where a child will perform incredibly well or incredibly poorly on the test, and it's not necessarily a fair reflection of their understanding. So that kind of works alongside our assessment of the children. Really not an overall deciding factor in how we assess your child. And I've put that on there because it's a question that I get asked every year. It does not inform which class your child goes into next year as well, so it's got nothing to do with that. It's just a form of assessment.
And it is used as a benchmark for targets for Key Stage 2.
Yes.
So once those tests are used, that's not how we do it, that's how the government measure our progress. The government will take the children's outcomes, the teacher assessment at the end of Key Stage 1, and that will be used to measure our success whilst they're teaching over Key Stage 2. And then the knock-on effect is the test that's in Key Stage 2 set secondary schools their targets for GCSEs. So there's a kind of knock-on effect there as well. So when you look at progress measures at secondary schools, that's based on what the children achieved at the end of Year 6. And progress measures at the end of primary are based on progress from the end of Year 2 to 6 as well. So kind of just joins the picture together, I guess.
So when, although there isn't a set day that we have to do the tests, they're administered and must be carried out during May. We let parents know when this is anyway. It's really essential the child is in school during this time. And after they're out of school, we do inform them, because we do really want the children to take the test, just because it is that other form of assessment, really. It's really important to us. And we'll let you know. I would just ask, don't make it a big thing, because we don't make it a big thing for the children, because what we don't want is these Year 2 children, who some of them have only just turned 7, coming into school and feeling nervous about it. They really don't need to at all. So what you can do, now, this mirrors a lot of the things that I say in all of the meetings I do, reading meetings, when I see you, parents, even those types of things. Continue reading with your child every single day, really important. Whether that's a case of your child reading to you, whether that's a case of you sharing a book together, and like I mentioned before, those questioning skills. If you do nothing else, question your child all the time about what they read. And particularly if you can move into that realm of those inference questions where they're having to give their own opinions on things, predict how a story might end, give their view on a particular character. That's the nice one there, ask them to look beyond what's written in the text, so that's your inference. I put prove it there, because that top one, because that's what I do in guided reading. When a child gives me an answer, I go, okay, prove it. And they have to find that piece of information and say, I know that because it says this in the text. Encourage the children to read unseen texts. So it's brilliant that the children choose their own reading books, but you might find the children often choose the same reading book all the time. So the tests obviously are completely unseen. They don't know these texts, so it's quite good for them just to have a read of books that they've never seen before. Support your child in scanning the text to look for information, because particularly on that second paper, there's a lot of writing. So if they can develop that skill of being able to scan and find the information they need, and that's a really good skill to be able to have. And talk about grammar and punctuation in the text, because again, like I mentioned, that's a really important thing for Year 2 to recognise. Why is there an exclamation mark there? Or why is that particular sentence written in bold print or capital letters? Why do you think the author chose that word? Why did he choose the word fabulous instead of the word good? those types of things. So loads of talking about the language that's used as well. And the reason I say that is that will feed into their writing as well. So the more vocab you can share with your children, the more you can talk with them, that will feed into their writing as well. We have a big push in our school of children kind of experiencing higher level vocabulary, and that's really important. So we do lots of things in class like word of the day and looking at what a word is, and it'll be a word they've never heard of before. And I'm not saying every child will start using that in their writing, but the more they're experienced to it, the more chance there is that they're going to use it, really. Encourage your child to write as often as possible. I know this, again, from talking to people at parents evening, I know this can be a challenge sometimes, but any sort of writing is really, really good. And thinking books are really good. I know kind of some people find them quite a challenge. I would say also, a question that often comes up is how much should I correct in my child's writing? I would say you've got to keep that enthusiasm going. You don't crush your child, but it's really good to maybe just pick out one thing. So I wouldn't like correct every single thing. You'll see when you look in children's books at school, we don't correct every single thing. We'll just pick out something. And then once they've mastered that, we'll move on to something else as well. So make number problems a part of everyday life. So we're doing maths all the time. All the time you're doing maths. So you don't necessarily have to talk to your children about the methods we use at school, but you can talk about, you know, how you calculate how long you've got till you leave the house, or how much cereal is left in the box, or those types of things. So talk about numbers all the time, because that will really support their mathematical thinking on both those types of papers and just in general life as well. And read the weekly newsletter, because I put, every class teacher puts information on it, so please make sure you read the newsletters. And if you don't receive the newsletters, ask the office to make sure you're on the mailing list, on the email list, because they're a really good way of knowing what we've done in class and what you can do to further support your children at home as well. I've just got a few little ideas, because I think, and it's very true, children only learn if it's fun. So you've got to make things fun. So Twister, this is more a phonics-based one, but Twister's a really good game to get, because you can actually change, instead of having the colours, you can have it on different things. So it could be number bonds. So for instance, they might spin to a number 6, and they have to find the corresponding number bond to 20 or 100. So there you go. So that was an example of using a number bond one, or arithmetic questions. So you could give a question like double 6, and they have to quickly go to 12. Just make it a bit active and a bit fun, and without being stereotypical, boys generally like things which are a bit more active rather than just sitting there. Is that the end? Oh no, okay, yeah. And again, like doing active things like this was sorting words into the word classes. Yeah, so things which are active, not necessarily just kind of sitting down. I'm not going to play these, but if you go onto YouTube, now I'd say approach YouTube with caution, and definitely make sure you watch the entire video before you show it to your child. But it's such a powerful resource, and there's loads and loads of songs, times tables songs about verbs. There's like this one at the top is a verb rap, and Football Super Movers, run by the BBC, but they do multiplication songs, and it's got like football stars on there and things like that. So have a look on YouTube, because there's masses of things. But I'll just say again, please make sure you watch it right to the end. You never know what's going to happen in the middle of that video. In summary, the tests are absolutely nothing to worry about. The children don't worry about them, so you really don't need to worry about them. Your child will be taught everything they need to know and much more. The final judgment is made by us, the class teacher, and we've been tracking and assessing your child all year, so whatever happens in that test, we know your child inside and out anyway. And the final thing I kind of mentioned when we were talking about the word classes, get your child to teach you. If you're thinking, oh, I don't know word classes or something like that, get them to teach you, because they will know. They will know the answers to these things. As always, thank you very much for your support. I've put some example tests out here for you to have a look at. If you do have any questions, I'm very happy for you just to come and have a chat with me down here. Over this side I've put, from a couple of years, I've put arithmetic and reasoning. This side I've got be paper 1, which is the one that has the text and the questions at the bottom of it. And then in here we've got that more challenging paper 2. That's it. Thank you very much.